Here's a little of Senior Government Minister Michaelia Cash.
I am very disappointed that the unions and the Labor Party are already indulging in a scare campaign. The emails that I am receiving state Sunday penalty rates have been abolished. That is an absolute disgrace, and they should be ashamed of themselves for going out and instigating such a scare campaign.
Michaelia Cash says a scare campaign has been launched by unions and Labor. What will it mean for our own hospitality industry here in Western Australia? Let's bring in Bradley Woods now, the Australian Hotels Association Western Australian CEO. Bradley, thank you for your company.
You're welcome, Ollie.
Bradley, is this a win for hoteliers?
Look, it's a slight win. We're only talking about very small changes to Sunday rates for full-time staff and part-time staff, and public holidays again. For casuals, the only change here is on public holidays, and we're still going to be paying casuals on a public holiday $47.28 for the average position. So someone getting $47.28 for working on a public holiday is still doing pretty well in most people's minds, I would think.
So it won't necessarily reverse the trend of some venues closing shop on public holidays because it's too expensive to trade?
Well, this is the tipping point, Ollie, in terms of at what point does it make it viable for a venue to open on a day that they wouldn't otherwise trade, and how do they go about putting on more staff if they can afford to. Now, for a number of businesses within the West Australian hospitality industry, they don't open on public holidays because paying $52 an hour is just too high. It just makes it totally unviable to make a business work on a public holiday. But when you multiply that across the $5 an hour, average $5 an hour reduction, say on $5 over 5 hours a day by another, say, 10 staff, the business is starting to make some savings here that could get to that point where it is viable. Now, for larger businesses, the savings are greater and it may well keep them open. For really small businesses, though, these reductions aren't enough, and that's our point that we've been making, is it falls well short of what we were recommending to the Fair Work Commission. So I suppose the outcome of all of this, legally, politically, socially, is no one's happy. But I would say, Ollie, that, the people who are most affected by this are the few hospitality workers that get to work on Sundays and public holidays. And they're the ones who benefit. But the ones who miss out altogether are the staff that never get those shifts because the businesses they work for can't afford to stay open on a Sunday and definitely can't afford to open on a public holiday. And it's those staff that have got something to gain at most out of this type of decision.
And Bradley, would you say most hospitality venues here in Perth, pubs and restaurants, would be using casual staff on Sundays?
Well, it's a mixture, Ollie. You're talking about a balance of around 35, 40% casual to the 60% full. 60% casual to 40% full time on average, and it varies around that depending on the business. And in each business, it's very different according to how the business is structured. But the key issue here is how do we strike a rate that is fair? We were never, ever arguing for abolishing penalty rates. And I've seen some of the propaganda and the blatant lies that have come out of the unions today suggesting that penalty rates have been abolished. They haven't. We've seen very small reductions of around $5 an hour on key days like public holidays. And that's the change here. Remembering, of course, hospitality workers are still taking home $47.28 on average for working on a public holiday. And I think that's not a bad wage to be taking home for someone who's privileged enough to get those hours. The key thing that we argued to the Fair Work Commission, and the AHA led the campaign for the hospitality industry to have these matters reviewed, is that the opportunity here is to create new employment and to see businesses open, more hours, and it's all about serving what the public want. I think the winners out of this are going to be the public who see local venues open more often and longer hours, Ollie.
Okay, so Bradley, do you believe that the measures that have been taken here will end up allowing some businesses to employ more people?
Absolutely, and it depends. It's a case-by-case situation with each business, but certainly there are a range of businesses that we've spoken to today that have said this actually takes them just over the edge to make it viable to open on public holidays or to keep open longer or to actually keep open longer on a Sunday as well. And of course, Sundays, again, the rates on Sundays are $33 an hour for casuals. They haven't changed. They are still $33 an hour, but the full-time rates have dropped around $4.50 an hour for full-time staff. And so there's a slight saving there that will allow businesses to restructure the ratio of who they have working those days. Now, the union is interested in protecting the small number of staff that get to work on the public holidays. Let's remember that. It's the privileged few that get to work on the public holidays and get that enormous rate of $52 an hour that they're protecting. They're not protecting the staff who miss out on work altogether because the business they work for can't afford to open. And that's a critical issue out of this decision.
Bradley, I read as well that the AHA was pushing for casual worker rates on public holidays who are currently receiving around 275% to 175%, but that has only dropped to 250%. So it doesn't seem as though, as you mentioned before, it's about a $5 decrease per hour in wages. By just saving $5 for the business, though, you do believe that is enough, though, to encourage more businesses to either decide to open on a public holiday or even stay open longer?
Well, for some of them, say it's open 10 hours and you've got 10 staff, that's around $500 a day. And it may be the difference between making it worthwhile to be open or losing money. And I think any business that's looking at this is always going to say, well, if I can't open the doors and make any money, I'm not going to. But if I can make a little, then it's worthwhile. And of course, the margin is not going to be that great, but at least it's heading in the right direction. And that's the key here, is that we've got to have a more modern industrial relations system that reflects the fact that the public and the community want to go to places on Sundays. 50 years ago, yes, they didn't go because, we had different social and religious views around people not allowing to drink on a Sunday. But that has changed, and we don't live in that society anymore. People want to go out. They want to go to the beach. They want to go to hospitality venues that are in the city or in regional areas of the state. We've got many, many more tourists travelling, and there's nothing worse than tourists saying to you, well, we can't find anything open on a Sunday or a public holiday. And that is just embarrassing when it occurs. But the reality is people will not open their businesses if they're going to lose money by opening the doors. If we can make it viable for them through a better industrial relations framework, they will employ more people. Think about all those extra kids that are going to get shifts on a Sunday or a public holiday because of a reduction in the rates for everyone else. They will actually take home pay and we'll have more people employed. And at the end of the day, that's the key, is that we end up with more staff employed overall.
And Bradley, of course, as tourism is becoming one of the major industries here in Western Australia, and we're slowly but surely becoming a 24/7 society. In summary, I suppose, Bradley, you'd say that this is a start, but there is some way to go.
A long way to go, Ollie, but this is definitely a start, particularly when we compete in a global tourism market, when staff in Europe, the UK, the US, even when you take in their tips, are being paid in equivalent Australian dollars about $10 to $13 an hour. We're still paying up to 300, 400% more than international competitors. And let's not even talk about Bali, where the staff over there are earning 1/10 to 1/15 of what Australians working, but we've got to still try and compete for that holiday dollar. So for Australia to be a competitive tourism nation, we need to have more flexible systems. We'd never argue for the same rates as they offer in those jurisdictions, but we have a reasonably good safeguard and good safety net for the staff now, but it does need to be more flexible to allow businesses to open.
All right, Bradley Woods, good to get your thoughts and analysis this afternoon. I appreciate your time on Perth Live.